Hello, welcome to our presentation on renewal and transformation in podcast advertising, a media ecology perspective. I am Olga Vilceanu, Professor of Public Relations and Advertising at Rowan University in New Jersey. My co-authors are Dr. Christine Johnson and Alexis Burns, our research assistant who is graduating this coming spring. Podcasting represents a fundamental shift in the new media ecology. The advertising industry is enthusiastically supporting dynamic ad insertion. Key findings and insights in our study focused on gender-based differences, mental health, companionship, good advertisement, and the role of the podcast host in audience engagement. For all the psychological and social consequences it triggered in human affairs, COVID-19 might as well be codified as a new medium that expands McLuhan's definition due to its ability to unify messages and signify the meaning of the year 2020 around the world. These messages, however, triggered different interpretations with various audiences consuming different types of media. The whole point of media culture is to maintain our interests as listeners and citizens actively involved in all stages of the communication process. Audiences shape content creation through simply tuning in, since more listeners equals more of the same content being produced. They also influence content processing through active involvement in sense-making given by the way listeners consume, interpret, and share the meaning of narratives. This study views media consumption as a reaction to the limiting conditions in the individual's external environment, primarily the pandemic-induced inability for most listeners to socialize, shop, work, and study in a space physically outside of their home. Podcasting is an inherently social medium, supporting the development of and belonging to communities that feel personally connected. Keywords and phrases frequently encountered included escape, levity, listening to things that interest me, and filling the silence. The conversational narrative, often encountered in podcasts in participants' words, feels like having a drink with friends or family or company during solitary activities, and overall less alone. This function of supporting alone time was previously addressed in a study conducted by Hirschman, Young, and Neustadter. During a year when COVID-19 pandemic meant many people lost their jobs or had to transform their entire lifestyle to accommodate working, going to school, socializing, and doing practically everything from their home, podcasts offered the illusion of companionship, combined with opportunities to learn about any topic I want. Among women in particular, podcasts often showed up as a companion while doing work, crafts, hobbies, or running errands. Men were more likely to indicate mobility and the episodic nature as things they liked about listening to podcasts, despite the unavoidable interruptions. When asked to write in their own words which aspects they disliked about listening to podcasts, about half of the respondents indicated advertisements. However, when asked what they did mind about advertisements specifically, respondents said dynamic ads were largely irrelevant to both the show and the listener's interests and needs. Furthermore, ads made for the radio as opposed to narrated by hosts and repetitive ads heard across too many podcasts were not liked. The next most frequent answers combined mentions of bad hosts or bad narratives or technical and production issues and armchair experts. One of the critical aspects in the podcast ecosystem is understanding how listening propagates or how listeners expand their list of shows. Again, podcasts demonstrated a communitary aspect. Most respondents said they would be willing to listen to a new podcast if recommended by a friend or acquaintance, trending in social media, or recommended by a familiar host. In the small group of non-binary participants, podcasts seemed of particular importance in accessing a new podcast if it focused on their special interest. In this mostly auditory medium, the role of the podcast hosts is critical for attracting and retaining listeners. If listeners think the host, narrative, or technical production is subpar, they will abandon the show, and with it, the opportunity to be exposed to both content and marketers. Bad hosts means ignorant or insufficiently educated about the topic, or lacking authenticity, or have unpleasant voices or clashing personalities. A good host, on the other hand, can be an effective promoter for other podcasts that might be new to the listeners, as well as brands included in casual conversation during the show. Participants clearly indicated they would prefer truthful and conversational stories about brands. Sales of products or services advertised during a podcast should indicate that the host is using the products or services promoted, or they are fundraising for a cause, or that sales are generating revenue for the podcast. Ads must be hilarious or at least entertaining. They should be connected to and included in the show content and be presented by the hosts in a way that is unique and not just an ad read. Again, the personality of the host is expected to show in performance for ads, just as it does in the rest of the show narrative, with most listeners interested to stay on for entertainingness, and if hosts are vamping or having fun or goofing with advertisement segments. Another open-ended question asked respondents how their podcast listening behaviors changed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Key themes focused on mental health. To listeners seeking to avoid the depressing news cycle of traditional media, podcasts became a way to escape the absolute shit show that is daily life right now and enjoy the company of people much cooler than the majority of those around me. Escapism became not so much an abandonment of previous media consumption from the former everyday life, but a way to avoid sad or impactful stories. The topic of special needs also appeared frequently in open-ended answers, with respondents referring positively to the ways in which podcasts help them calm an anxious brain or keep my brain busy. The quality alone time of normal times became forced isolation, and listening to podcasts became a nice sort of fall companionship. Overall, the abundance of references to the temporary changes and permanent transformations in participants' lives underlines the principle on which podcasting was founded: a harmonious and dynamic relationship between long-term hosts, brands willing to embrace the specifics of this medium, ever-changing topics, and a deeply personal desire to engage in learning. Thank you for listening to this presentation about the connections between listeners, podcast hosts, show content, and advertising messages. Please reach out if you have any questions or if you'd like to suggest collaborating ideas. We would love to hear from you. Thank you.